Welcome back, Mr. Goodberry. The First Star Logistics studio is fully equipped and ready to record.
Welcome back to Bengals on the Brain, presented by First Star Logistics. I'm your host, Joe Goodberry. We're going to continue our series of the last 25-year Bengals roster, going back to the Marvin Lewis era and the Zac Taylor era, bringing them together to create one 53-man roster. So we're going to have some cuts here, talk about some guys who did not make the cut, talk about who our starters would be. The comments have been great on the first one there. We've got a few of those I'll bring up as we're doing them, because I saw some of you sneak peeking already at the corner of who is on the offensive line. Today will be the offensive line, and it's a good unit, a very good unit. I'd put this offensive line up against pretty much any franchise of the last 25 years. I started thinking about it and looking at other teams, and I'm like, all right, you got two Hall of Famers here for the Bengals. I think eventually we'll get that. Not every team even will have one Hall of Famer. So to have two puts you in the elite tier. And while we've got a lot of new Bengals fans that have been frustrated, even if you're a 10-year fan of this team, you're frustrated with this offensive line, and that's legit. But the 15 years prior, and then a little bit sprinkled in current guys, I think you've got a squad of an offensive line. Let's dive in. Let's start off with left tackle. So first of all, you see the 10 up there. I'm keeping 10 offensive linemen. Remember, I have to build this 53-man roster. We could have went with 9. You typically have 8 active on game day. So 2 guys would be inactive. We'll go through that and figure out who would and who's got the least amount of flexibility here. But starting with left tackle, I've got Andrew Whitworth as their starter. And Andrew Whitworth would be probably a franchise best left tackle for most franchises in the NFL, but the Bengals have Anthony Munoz, right? So we're talking just last 25 years. Because there were some comments that like Munoz is great, or this guy, or James Brooks. And I know I brought up James Brooks when talking about running backs, but it was for a different comparison. Want to be clear, this is just the last 25 years. And you had to have played or appeared in 25 Bengals games. So Andrew Whitworth, great player for them, will be a Ring of Honor, potentially Hall of Fame guy. He'll be right on that cusp. I think that Walter Payton Man of the Year and getting a ring with the Rams helps out a ton for him. Plus, he's a great personality and will stay in the spotlight being in the media. I think he's got a good shot to be a Hall of Famer. Let's talk about Witt as a player and the skills he brought. Obviously massive. He was 6'7", 330. He had these skinny hips and skinny legs. He was really built like a triangle. But I think that gave him the athleticism and the strength. He had this great upper body strength, played with wide hands, would wrap guys up and really engulf them and absorb power from the rusher. And he was athletic enough to mirror and match with these guys and go toe-to-toe with the elite agile edge rushers. And Witt could play guard too. And he played guard for a couple of seasons for the Bengals and had no problem there either. There were times where it looked like Witt couldn't be the run blocker I thought they needed him to be. I'm talking late in his career. Couldn't get low anymore. Couldn't drive as much anymore. And I was with the Bengals when I thought, maybe he's getting to the end of his career. They extended him 3 times. He's 35 now. He goes to the Rams and proved to still have a lot left in the tank and was a very good player for a long time. But for the Bengals, multiple Pro Bowls, just one of the best players they had on a stacked roster, especially those 2011 and 2015 Bengals teams were absolutely loaded with talent, and Witt was still one of the best players on those teams. Behind him, though, Levi Jones. Levi Jones' peak was as good as most of these guys on this offensive line. Levi Jones, for like a 2 to 2.5 year stretch, was fantastic for the Bengals. And he was a first-round pick that people weren't sold on. I remember at that time that some thought he should go a little bit later. Even people around Cincinnati weren't sure a couple years into his career. His stretch when the Bengals, like that 05 type team with Carson Palmer and a loaded O-line, Levi Jones was very, very good. Agile, athletic, played with aggressiveness. I really, really liked watching him play when I was young at the time and learning offensive line. I knew what Willie was on the right side, and they had we'll talk about all those guys pretty much from the 05 O-line. But Levi, to me, was like, wow, that guy is just athletic and can just functionally perform just based off his athleticism. And I'm sure he was If he heard this, he'd be like, "Oh, I use technique too, no doubt about it." But just from an athletic standpoint, I was always marveled with him and his ability to stay in front of guys. But then injuries started to sap that a little bit, and his career wasn't as long as probably should have been, because his peak was very, very high. Orlando Brown Jr., we were keeping on this roster. He was almost one of the guys where I'm like, do I cut him? He or Andre Smith for the last tackle spot? Orlando Brown, we've only had 2 years for him, and it's really a year and a half of, in Bengals football and fitting in there. But I think we're taking his body to we're talking talent here, not just your achievements with the Bengals. That's why I'm not bringing up how many Pro Bowls and how many, catches these guys had. Orlando Brown is a very good starting offensive tackle. And he wins with his size, obviously, at nearly 6'8", 360 pounds. That power, that strength. I love his personality. I love the way he carries himself. I think he's a very smart guy. Obviously, great bloodlines, as his father played and was a great player at tackle as well. Orlando Brown, to me, can play right tackle, can play left tackle. I want him active on game days because he can play either of those positions, where I think Levi Jones is only a left tackle. I think Witt could play guard for you if you needed to. And your best lineup might be putting Witt at left guard and letting Levi Jones or Orlando Brown, whoever's, at their peak at that time of this fictitious game we're going to play here or season, and let them play left tackle. You might be right on that if you wanted to go that route. But I think if these are your 3 left tackles, largely of the last 25 years, you have done a great job, Bengals. Sure, there was a little bit of gap there, and one of them you had to get as a free agent. Whatever. Those are 3. You're in good shape at the left on the blind side spot. Moving into left guard, I went with Clint Bowling over Eric Steinbach. We'll start with that. Talent-wise, Steinbach is probably the best of this. Even the 3 guys, I cut Evan Mathis here, but Steinbach was super athletic, super tall too. He's 6'5". He was kind of thin, so he didn't have that power all the time that you wanted. Didn't always play with great leverage, but Steinbach could move really well. You could pull him. He could climb to the second level. He'd erase linebackers. He was a pretty solid player overall that I thought should have been a multi-time Pro Bowler. And maybe he, when he went left and went to the Browns, I think people recognized who he was and how good he was. But at the same time, I thought he was good for the Bengals. But Clint Bowling was a 4th round pick, 2011, that out of Georgia, that many saw as just a steady, solid starter throughout his career. And that's not a knock, right? Bowling was that. He was technically sound. He was fundamentally sound. He was assignment sound. I almost never saw this guy make a mistake at all while watching film. He wasn't the most physical guy. He wasn't the most athletic guy. He had enough of everything to make him, at times, a very good guard. But over the course of his career, solid, steady. If you put him next to Witt, you got no problems on the left side. Those 2 worked really well in tandem, which is another reason why I say we're going to give Clint Bowling the start at the left guard spot over Andrew Whitworth. And we'll see how it goes. Maybe Steinbach beats him out and we go from there. But Bowling, very happy with his career. If he would have continued, maybe the transition from Marvin Lewis to Zac Taylor would have been a little bit better. But I believe he had that blood clot and had to eventually retire. So we see some social media posts every once in a while. It's good to see Clint Bowling still doing well and good now. He's our left guard, in my opinion, of the last 25 years. I want to get to the guy that's great out here because many of you may not know who he is. If you're a newer fan, Evan Mathis, type in, go to Wikipedia, go to PFF, whatever you want to use, whatever you use to search players up. Evan Mathis was in a battle with Nate Livings for the Bengals for the left guard job. And now Nate Livings was not very good. He was a startable player for a couple of years, but largely was not good. Did not help the offense more than he hurt it. Meanwhile, Evan Mathis, whenever he played, he was fantastic. And this is the very beginning of like film Twitter and film guys on Twitter breaking down film and looking at it and going, hey, this guy's really good. This guy's great. Why isn't this guy playing more? Look when he got in. Look how good he did. PFF grades are coming out. Evan Mathis, fantastic. Evan Mathis goes on and goes to the Eagles and ends up having Pro Bowl seasons afterwards. Evan Mathis, he deserves a shout out here because had he have played for the Bengals and played more, he was good and legitimately good. And they let him walk out of their door without really giving him a shot, a fair shot, a full shot. Apparently he was a character and he had some things you had to work through in terms of, who he was as a person, but he was so dang good. that he was probably the best guard that they've had in the last 25 years, but just he wasn't the best for the Bengals. His stretch with the Eagles was fantastic. Moving into center, I think we got two very similar guys and good guys here in Richie Bram and Ted Karras. Now, Bengals players from that era, anyone around Bengals from the Richie Bram late 90s to early 2000s era loved Richie Bram and talked about his intelligence, his character, his leadership, in his play. He was probably the weak link on the offensive line of the 05 type teams, but he was still really good. And Richie Bram is maybe the best center the Bengals have maybe ever had. There's a couple guys that, obviously the first overall pick they've ever had. The answer to that question was actually Bob Johnson. So if you get the trivia question, first ever Bengals draft pick, Bob Johnson at center. Number 22 on our greatest 100 Bengals series from last year. So I definitely want to be correct on that. But Richie Bram, probably the best modern day center they've had. I think the players that played with him would probably say that. And they just speak so highly of him. Where Ted Karras, again, I think Ted Karras is a very similar guy. Steady, smart, leadership. Does all the things you want him to do in terms of stability. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the strongest guy, not the fastest guy, right? Like he's good at functionally accomplishing his mission. And that may just sound like a bunch of jumbled words. But what I mean is when I watch film with Ted Karras, and this is how I felt about Richie Bram as well. It's why I speak of him similarly. When I watch Karras, he rarely loses. He rarely wins outright, right? He's not dominating guys. I'm not impressed with his athleticism, but he rarely loses outright. And he finds just enough ways to edge that guy out or squeeze that guy out or flip his hips and torque that guy out of the way, just enough to let the running back get by or the quarterback get by or whatever it may be. Karras coming off his best pass protection year last year, according to PFF. I probably thought of Karras as like a C+ player. He may be a B- player. My opinion of him has risen over his time with the Bengals. If you say Karras should start over Richie Bram, I wouldn't argue with that too much at all. The guy worth mentioning here is Kyle Cook. Kyle Cook was an unknown for the Bengals in a lot of ways. This is when I started. One of my first jobs writing and doing blogging and things like that was for Cincy Jungle, and I was grading weekly the offensive line and individually. And the reason I did this because going into 09, they had a lot of questions, and they had Carson Palmer coming off the UCL in his throwing arm that he caused them to miss, I think, 12 games in 08. They were starting with a new revamped O-line, Nate Livings, a couple other guys that you just did not know who they were. And they had to rely on a run game behind Cedric Benson and a limited quarterback. And so a lot of the focus was on the O-line. And just were guys that we've never heard of or seen play. And about 4 or 5, 6 games in, I remember thinking to myself, Kyle Cook is decent. He's startable. Because I remember Nate Livings, I'm looking at like, this guy's not good. What are they seeing in him? But Kyle Cook is good. And you're fine there. And Cook ended up starting a couple years more after that and was a solid player the entire time. So while most of their center, like the early years were Rich Bram, the late years now were Ted Karras, there was some, maybe Trey Hopkins should be mentioned here. I don't think Billy Price should be. There was some question after Richie Bram. They tried to figure it out. Kyle Cook stabilized that mid part and gave them a solid starting center for a handful of years. And he was a cool dude. I actually met him before a game. I can't remember what game that was last year, but I saw I see a Cook jersey, and I said, is that Cook? Kyle Cook? And they go, oh, yeah, he's right here next to you. And I turned, I'm like, oh, this dude is tall. Of course he is, plays offensive line. Moving on to right guard. Their best free agent signing of the Marvin Lewis era, Bobby Williams. And he was probably their best free agent signing in history until the Zac Taylor era, where we can get to other guys that were really good signings. It's the best free agent period we've had, even though it's now at this point 5 years ago. Anyways, Bobby Williams. The combination of he and Willie Anderson, on the right side was a joy to watch when I was young. And Bobby was a guy who I think he struggled to find his footing and consistency with the Eagles. He signed with the Bengals, and he was great for them. Talking about a very square, big dude with giant hands. Absolutely. I mean, like the palm of his hand, big circular. He'd smack these guys. He'd daze them. He was nasty. He was physical. They would drive guys out of the hole consistently, he and Willie Anderson. And Bobby became a captain for the team, a leader for the team, really stabilized his career and is an underappreciated, underrated player in not just NFL, but even by Bengals fans. So I think Bobby, he and Willie Anderson, when I talk about right tackle, I'll talk more about Bobby, but they were so good together and so much fun to watch. Controversial here, but I'm starting him over Kevin Zeitler. And some people may say, put Kevin Zeitler in. I wouldn't argue it too much. Kevin Zeitler, a first round guard pick by the Bengals, was a better run blocker than pass blocker coming out. And then about 3 years in, he became a great pass blocker. And now not so good of a run blocker because he gets older. I think run blocking takes its toll on you as you get older, banging your head around. You need that athleticism. You need to want to drive guys out of there. But Kevin Zeitler, great player. Should have been a Ring of Honor player for the Bengals, but they let him walk in free agency because they don't pay guards, but they'll spend a first round pick on one. Whatever. Let's move on, Joe, and celebrate these guys. Zeitler was very, very good for the Bengals and has been a great player over the last 15 years or so, whatever it's been in that range, 13 years. Don't make me do math. But Zeitler, if he's your starter, if maybe he can play left guard over Clint Bowling, right? If we're just talking about high-end play. Very good. Very, very good. For all the guard troubles we have now, give me one of any of these guys in their prime. And that includes the guy that's great out here that needs an honorable mention that didn't make the cut, Alex Kappa. Give me a prime Alex Kappa at right guard right now. I would take that. Evan Mathis, give me Eric Steinbach, Clint Bowling, give me Bobby Williams or Kevin Zeitler, and championship. I'm calling it right now. The Bengals have had good guard play. Not amazing guard play, but very good. If I was looking at it like A+ left tackle play, A+ right tackle play for this team here, Bobby Williams and Kevin Zeitler, A-. Clint Bowling, Eric Steinbach, B. Richie Bram, Ted Karras, B-. Overall, very, very good. Right tackle, top 10 player in Bengals history, Ring of Honor, chance for a Hall of Fame. I think he will make the Hall of Fame. He was very high on our 100 greatest Bengals list. He's the best right tackle in modern football history, most decorated for sure. I mean, that's inarguable because those are Pro Bowls and All Pros and all that are facts. Willie Anderson, and we're talking about Willie Anderson and Andrew Whitworth as our two tackles, guys that are huge, long, strong, athletic. And Willie wasn't the most athletic dude, right? But he maximized, I think, what he had because he didn't have a lot of wasted movements, didn't have wasted footwork, wasn't a lot of gap between when his feet are off the ground. Like he was very well balanced. His feet became really good, and those low, wide hands made it very hard to get around. You had two options. I can run around a guy who's extremely long and great technique, or I can try and run through a guy that is huge, strong, and nasty. Pick your poison. Those sound like losing propositions in a lot of ways. And Willie was a smart dude. Obviously, he's gone on to train offensive linemen and spread his word and his knowledge as far as he can. Obviously, deserving of a spot here. One of the best players. Even if we're looking at this entire lineup, starters, we'll save that for the end. But like, would he be the best player? He's got an argument for it. Andre Smith and Jonah Williams. You may say, what? Remember, Andre Smith made our top 100 greatest Bengals of all time. He played for them a ton, a long career, former first-round pick. His peak couple years were like B+, B level play at least. And then he had some injury years and some years where he was just average or below average mixed in, but he played a long time. When the Bengals needed a left tackle years after he left, they called him up. He came in and played left tackle for them, and he was a career right tackle. Andre Smith is worth mentioning here as a player that played for them a lot and could start if you absolutely needed him to. And I'm talking about in a top 25 year excellent roster around the league. Andre Smith is a borderline making that roster. It's pretty good. Jonah Williams, again, another first round pick. Injuries probably stopped him from reaching his peak and doing it consistently. But he was their starting left tackle in the Super Bowl year, and he had a good year that year. He can play right tackle. He can play left tackle. The only reason I have him over here at right tackle is because we have 3 guys on the roster at left tackle that can play. And because Orlando Brown can play right tackle, these guys are not making the roster. So Jonah Williams deserves a shout out for being a solid player, even though people dislike him because he never reached that peak. Sometimes that doesn't happen. We got a couple guys here that never reached that peak. Jermaine Gresham never reached that peak of what he was supposed to be, yet he's still here on this list. I don't think Eric Steinbach ever reached the peak of what he was supposed to be, yet he's still on this list. I don't think Joe Mixon reached the peak of what he was supposed to be. He should be the number 1 back, talent-wise, was excellent coming out of, but that's my own evaluation. And that's why we're doing it from my perspective, because these are my evaluations, because I've seen all of these guys play. And I've got scouting reports written on going back to Andy Dalton. Anyone before Andy Dalton that I wrote a scouting report on? I'm looking at it because he was 2011. Jermaine Gresham I did, so he was before that. Yeah, Gresham's probably the original. Gresham, Bowling, AJ Green. Obviously, those are all 2011. When I don't see any 2010 guys on there. So, yeah, probably just Gresham. I remember writing a mock draft and grading the draft as it happened and writing about Jermaine Gresham for the Bengals. So these are players that I have watched either as a fan, as a young avid football enjoyer, or in a this is not professional, semi-professional capacity. Tell me where I'm wrong here. Am I wrong with who I started? Am I wrong with, I saw a comment saying Levi Jones at his peak was actually better than Andrew Whitworth. I don't agree with that, but if that's how you feel, make your case right now. If you feel Kevin Zeitler should be over Bobby Williams, make the case. Maybe you think Ted Karras should be the starting center. Maybe you like Eric Steinbach more than Clint Bowling. All fair if you want to make that argument. I think overall as an offense, this unit looks good, looks damn good. You can do anything you want with this team. Joe Burrow, Corey Dillon, Joe Mixon, Chad, AJ Green, Jamar Chase, Tyler Eifert, and Reggie Kelly at tight end, Andrew Whitworth, Clint Bowling, Richie Bram, Bobby Williams, Willie Anderson. That is a fantastic offense as a whole. So when I said I want to get back to this, is Willie Anderson the best player of that unit? Andrew Whitworth would be up there. Chad, AJ Green, Jamar Chase would be up there. Corey Dillon would be up there. Joe Burrow would be up there. Those would be your guys that are like, yeah, these are our studs. These are the guys that that carry this offense on a 25-year team. I love it. I mean, let me know where I went wrong. Let me know who I missed. I probably missed somebody here. I didn't do it all from memory. I went to profootballreference.com. I don't know if you guys ever use StatEd. And I put in last 25 years, played at least 25 games, sort it by approximate value, and I went through each list. So I could have missed someone, but if they fall into those categories, let me know. Before the next episode of Bengals on the Brain, presented by First Star Logistics, where we'll go over the defense, see how far we can get. Maybe we can do it in one episode. I've been talking a lot. If you guys like the evaluation aspect and looking at these old players, let me know too, so I can have the energy to get through the rest of it. Your comments are a lot of motivation. Until next time, Hooday.
Bengals fans, tired of the same old post-game chatter? Want real insight beyond the scoreboard? Then you need Bengals on the Brain with Joe Goodberry, presented by First Star Logistics. Joe Goodberry isn't just a fan, he's a die-hard Bengals football analyst. Every week, Joe dives deep into the Bengals game film, breaking down the plays that mattered, revealing hidden strategies, and uncovering the true impact of individual performances. Get ready for post-game analysis like you've never heard before, player evaluations that go beyond the stats, and the most in-depth Bengals draft coverage on the internet. Don't just watch the Bengals, understand the Bengals. Subscribe to Bengals on the Brain with Joe Goodberry on the First Star Media Group's YouTube channel. Get smart, get obsessed, get Bengals on the Brain.